Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We are super excited to have you here today, where we're going to be talking about how do we adopt new technologies like Bluetooth tools into our processes and how do we run a fantastic comfort consult. So I am beyond excited to be joined by some amazing folks here today. The first and foremost, we got Eric Kaiser, who is the industry engagement manager at True Tech Tools and co-host of the Building HVAC Science podcast. We are joined by Joe Medosh, the client success manager at MeasureQuick and an expert trainer in all things home performance. And then finally, we have Tim DeStasio, who is the owner and president of Comfort Science Solution and has formerly owned and operated his own HVAC businesses across North Carolina. And in terms of what today's going to look like, Tim is going to take the first 25 to 30 minutes to walk you through his incredible process with commentary from the Peanut Gallery, being Eric, Joe, myself, and you all. And we look forward to hearing your thoughts, your questions as we go. And then we're going to open it up for a discussion just about how do we adopt these processes? How do we design them? How do we improve upon them over time? And how does this change based off of where we are across the many climate zones of the United States? So with that, and without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Tim to take it away.
Thanks, Shelby. I'm Tim DeStasio, and I am the owner-operator of Comfort Science Solutions based here in coastal North Carolina. And I am a consulting, design, and contractor training company. And just so I'm here to try to make the industry a little bit better and give back. I sold my last contracting business and allowed me a little bit of opportunity to do things that I want to do instead of things that I have to do. And one of the things I was really, really interested in is doing more comfort consultations to help get to the root cause of home comfort, high humidity, indoor air quality issues. When I had my contracting business, we simply just could not get the bandwidth to do all that in-house. And so early on when I started that business, I teamed up with a local weatherization contractor, and they did all the testing for me. We handled HVAC things. They handled weatherization and home performance envelope problems, and it worked very, very well. But I started to think that HVAC companies really would do very well to have that process in-house and to refer less of that work out, do the diagnostics in-house, because let's face it, when people have a comfort problem, they typically don't call a weatherization company. Sometimes they don't even know those companies exist, but they will call an HVAC company. And unfortunately, this industry, as Jim Bergman says, is broken. And when an HVAC company gets that call, most of them are set up to send what they call a comfort advisor. And that name is very misleading because essentially they're sending out somebody who is there only to sell you a box, either to sell you a new system, to sell you a laundry list of things that may or may not fix the problem. They're not there to diagnose the problem. They don't know anything about home comfort, home performance. They probably don't know how to measure duct leakage or envelope leakage. They don't know how to do a real heat load calculation, manual J. And so they're sending a poorly trained person out there that has very little field experience, that sole intent is there to sell the homeowner something that they may or may not need. And what I wanted to do is to create a comfort consultation process that addressed the root causes of why homes are uncomfortable, why there's high humidity, why there's poor indoor air quality, and all those other problems that are sort of related. So what I found is that there isn't really an app out there that does exactly what I wanted to do. There are apps that do portions of what I want it to do, but the actual process, the workflow, gathering all that information together, there really wasn't anything that checked all the boxes for me. So I found a free online checklist program from Safety Culture. It's Eye Auditor is the name of the app, and I just created my own, and it brings in photo documentations, very customizable. And I've just worked on it over the last couple of years to get it to the point where I feel like it still needs a little bit of work, but it's almost there. And the first thing that happens is an HVAC, a full system assessment. A lot of times I get those calls, and the person just thinks they have an HVAC problem. So we book the diagnostic. This process is it takes at least an hour and a half. So I charge accordingly. And I don't get into a rush. And this is the same exact process that I use whether I'm doing a service call, a comfort problem, even a maintenance. It is a 60+ point assessment of the entire system. I document everything, and I take readings. I include screenshots from Measure Quick, the Measure Quick conclusions at the end, but it's sort of done my way. And then a lot of times we find that the HVAC system wasn't really the whole problem, that now we have an envelope problem. And so then if the customer is willing to pay for the rest of the comfort consultation, or if they want to book the whole thing together, then I proceed on with the envelope assessment. And that's where all the cool tools get broken out. So what I've done is I've taken a screen recording of the process. We're going to start with the HVAC assessment. So Ben's gonna share that screen, and we'll pause here or there, but we're going to start. We're going to enter in the customer name, and we're just kind of doing this as if it was at my house. And then some of the reasons why we're there, some of the points that the customer told us they were having. Now, the very first thing is if I'm doing a maintenance, there is a checklist of maintenance items. If I'm not there for a maintenance, I'm not checking those. Those are all NA. And then the next thing I do is I do a walkthrough, and I'm just documenting what kind of system is in place, what kind of thermostats there. Every single line item that you see being populated takes at least one photograph. I'm even taking a look at filters, ductwork, the condition, the craftsmanship of the ductwork. I'm taking a look at the indoor unit. Let's say it's the split system. We're going to gather that model and serial number. We're going to get the age. As you see, there are certain color coordinated things. Green means things are good. Red, they really need attention. And every now and then you'll see a yellow, which is sort of like a fair. It's like, well, it's sort of good, but it could be better. And as we go down through that, I am doing an assessment of all the different subsystems and components, very similar to what MeasureQuick does, but there's a few things that I'm doing that I feel like are important. And that's why I'm kind of including this. Now, this particular system that you're seeing here, I'm simulating a split heat pump, so there is no gas, but there would be a gas inspection of all those burners and components. Then we move out to the outdoor unit, and we're doing like a refrigerant acid test. That is built into my pricing, that I do a refrigerant acid test when I go out there, because that gives us insight on the system itself, the refrigerant, and maybe it's ran hot for a long time and some acid is developed in the system. Then we go into performance, and this is where I get MeasureQuick involved. And I'm looking at those MeasureQuick screens, and I'm including screenshots in there. I'm doing things like showing temperature split, enthalpy, whether or not these are high, low, or within range. And then if we can just pause right here, because I'm going to get behind if I don't, Ben. If you can just pause. This is where also I break out the true flow grid from the Energy Conservatory, because I want to quantify my airflow. MeasureQuick does a very good job quantifying airflow, but if the system is really, really messed up on the refrigerant side, sometimes those numbers are a little bit skewed. I want to know exactly what my airflow is, and that's what the true flow grid does for me. And I know MeasureQuick's gotten a little better. Didn't mean to ruffle any feathers, Joe, but that's just been my experience with MeasureQuick, is that I'd rather get the true flow grid in there just so I know for certain that there isn't any temperatures that may be skewing that airflow a little bit. And then we're just gathering more information, including screenshots, total capacity. Joe's raising his hand. He's got a question for me. So go
Yeah,
ahead.
so I guess if Eric or I show up and we say we got some comments for you. So
Yeah.
real quick, that the no, we love the TrueFlow grid. We are fully embrace that and support that fully. But if you wanted to make sure that you're always wondering, like, were those numbers correct, or was that TrueFlow in the right location? Do I have a lot of duct leakage? That if you use Measure Quick together with the TrueFlow grid, I can
Yes.
tell that I actually have an accurate, very accurate measurement. So usually we say we should be within about plus or minus 10%. So that's
Yeah.
one way to do it. So you can do the TrueFlow in Measure Quick or outside of it, but our two psychrometers are giving you, as you said, a lot of information.
Yeah.
Just two psychrometers give you airflow and enthalpy and a variety of other stuff in BTU. So just want to
Exactly.
comment
Yeah.
on that.
So I'm using a combination of the two. I am using the True Flow Grid app within MeasureQuick. I didn't say that, so thank you for for adding that, Joe. And so that way we're quantifying airflow. That's huge. We can't make any decisions whether a system is properly charged or not unless we know our airflow. And then because Measure Quick is so powerful, I'm able to see what my total capacity is for the system. I've got a 3-ton system. Am I putting out anywhere close to 3 tons of air conditioning? Out of that 3 tons, how much of that is sensible? How much of that is latent? And then I really love the efficiency, the real-time SEER operation within Measure Quick. Now, for that, I need a power quality meter. At the end of the call, we're going to talk about some of the tools that I use, where to get them on True Tech Tools. But yeah, so we can go ahead and unpause it here and go through it. But I am documenting all of those things. And again, I'm just trying to see whether my delivered capacity is where I need it to be. If we're in heat pump heating mode, there's some items there. And then if we're working on a furnace there, we do a full combustion analysis on the system. And of course, that can be done within Measure Quick, and there's some great tools to do that. And then at the very end, we can just pause it right here. I do if I don't know, Ben, if you can go back like 5 seconds. If not, it's okay. But I do a indoor air quality screening, and I have a personal indoor air quality meter. It's from Atmotube. I'm thinking about trying a different one as well. But I lay that on the kitchen table and right next to my keys. That way I can't leave without taking that meter back up. But I'm taking a screenshot of that at the end. I'm also taking a picture of my personal carbon monoxide monitor that I carry on my person, just to make sure. These are things that remind me to just check the indoor air quality, because there may be some sales opportunities there if we see that there's a high particulate matter, if we see high VOCs, if there's high humidity. Those are all things that I'm looking for. When I look at humidity, I'm looking at dew point more than relative humidity. So I'm taking screenshots of that indoor air quality and carbon monoxide. And then just at the end of that process there, these are things that are just a good reminder for me. I make myself take a picture of the panels and the door secured on the equipment, make sure the disconnects are on and that the interior area is clean. That's to kind of cover myself in case the customer tries to come back and say that I left the area dirty. I photo document everything. So as we went through that very speedy process, that takes about an hour and a half, and everything gets photo documentation. We can go ahead and keep it rolling again. So at the very end, I'm going to type up some summary of what I did and recommendations. Now, this particular system that I'm simulating, it had some leaky ductwork. It had some lack of maintenance. It was dirty. There's a few things that I found. Now I'm typing this in. It would be really awesome if we could incorporate AI where some of these summaries and recommendations are based off of the inputs in the report. That's sort of like my dream of where this could go. But then I'm going to give some recommendations. Now, because this process is so thorough, I offer a 90-day no breakdown guarantee. So if I give your system a clean bill of health and you have a service call, a breakdown, a legit breakdown within 90 days, I come back out and I waive any kind of diagnostic or trip fees. And to this day, I've not had one call back yet. So that's probably higher or longer time period than what most companies offer. I can confidently give that because I'm doing a full system assessment. And it's the same process all over again. Now we can pause right here, Ben. This is what you just saw there was a list of all the items that were flagged. Anything that failed an assessment or had a reading that was out of range, it gives me a list. And what that is a nice, I wish that list actually came before I typed in all my recommendations, but in this app, that part is not customizable. But it's a good reminder of everything that I found. I want to make sure that they get mentioned in the summary, but also that I'm giving recommendations and options to fix all the things that I found. So it's in line with what Measure Quick tells us to do. We want to develop repeatable processes where we do full system assessments. If the system is got a bad capacitor, I will eventually find that it has a bad capacitor, but I am also going to find a lot of other things because I check the entire system instead of just run it up there. All right, it's a bad capacitor, pop a new capacitor on there. I band-aid the system. I move on to my next service call. I'm leaving so many opportunities on the table there. With this assessment, it allows me to slow down and find more stuff that is legit, that is ethical repairs. So we can keep going here on the video. So then this is the report that gets sent to the customer. It even grades the system similar to what MeasureQuick does based on all the inputs that I gave. And then, we can liken that. Well, your system is working as a C minus. I can do these things. We can get it up to a B plus. Very similar to MeasureQuick. Everything has some photo documentation. You'll see some photo documentation, some screenshots of my MeasureQuick performance. And then just everything that I did is here on the list, and they can see whether something passed, it failed, and we're documenting everything here. And so I can go back even a few months later if there's a question about the system. I've gotten all that documentation right there. And so this particular system was something that I actually made a YouTube video on very recently. I was just documenting some issues with ductwork. This particular zoning system was not properly designed. They had a 3-ton system on a 2 tons worth of ductwork, and I found a lot of issues, small issues, big issues, but I was able to build um, a good list of recommendations. And not all the recommendations get approved, but we build a roadmap to get the system to operate better. We're documenting the unit age. And so as we get close to that 10 to 15 mark and over, then we can start having conversations about putting a planned replacement down the road. But my sole intent for this call is not to find a replacement unit, but it is a conversation that we can have with the proper documentation. And here we can see CFMs per ton. If I'm between 350 and 450, that is qualitatively good for me. And then, we just keep going on down the list here. Superheat, subcooling, those things are pass fail. Either they're in range or they're not in range. If they're not in range, then I need to investigate further. And we're getting towards the end of this report. But as you can see, this is a multi-page report that the homeowner gets. And then here we have the list of recommendations. We have our top recommendation, which fixes everything, that allows me to give the 90-day no breakdown guarantee. And then we have additional recommendations that are sometimes just a portion of that top recommendation. Maybe we start splitting things up. Maybe recommendation number 4, we throw in an accessory like a surge protector. I know it says search protector. I guess I was talking to text, but maybe if we do want to throw in an ethical sale of an accessory that has nothing to do maybe with the comfort problem, but it is something to keep in mind. There are places to do that. Well, if we can just pause right here, this next report is now the envelope assessment. Now, I don't do an envelope assessment unless someone is paying me to do an envelope assessment. A lot of times the service call starts with just that HVAC report that we just talked about. But if I tell them, look, your HVAC system does not appear to be the only issue here, we need to do a full comfort consult, this next list is what I do. And this is where all the cool tools come out. Typically, if I'm doing a full comfort consult that includes the HVAC assessment, I am there at a typical house for at least 6 to 8 hours. So you got to be paid accordingly when you do this. So let's go ahead and go through that list. Again, very similar. I'm putting in the job information. We're going to simulate this at my house. I'm recording what temperature and humidity there is outside because that has a bearing on a lot of things. If it's a dry day outside, then it's probably going to be dry inside the house. That doesn't necessarily mean there wouldn't be a humidity problem in the house if it was a more humid day. I'm also putting things in like the conditioned floor area, the volume, because I'm going to need that for my blower door test. And then I'm walking around and I'm photographing all sides of the buildings. I'm putting in some other system information, how many HVAC systems there are, if we have fuel fired stuff, just documenting things, which is going to come back later on in the report. And I'll have to make decisions on that. Why am I there? I'm checking boxes of complaints that the customer has. Now, if we can pause right here, the first section of this is a moisture assessment. I'm walking around the house and I'm seeing if there are any visible signs of bulk water coming into the house. Do I have gutters that aren't working? Do I have water stains where they shouldn't be? I'm going to go up into the attic and I'm going to see whether there are signs that a roof is leaking. I'm going to crawl in the crawl space to see whether there's signs of water intrusion there. So I am looking for mostly bulk water here, signs of biological growth, signs of moisture problems, but also, signs that maybe there's high humidity. So if you want to keep playing it, I'm going to take pictures of what kind of vapor barriers in the crawl space, if that's applicable. and just a lot of different things that have to do with moisture. Documenting everything you see here is going to get a bunch of photos. We can pause right here. And now I'm doing an envelope assembly assessment. This is going to help me later on when I do a conduit tech load calculation, because I am documenting my R values, the type of construction I have, what kind of attic I have, and I'm getting pictures on all this. You can go ahead and keep playing it. So I'm gathering all that information and I'm taking it in, trying not to make any conclusions early on. I'm looking to see whether penetrations are sealed. That's huge in my humid climate for humidity problems. What kind of attic ventilation do we have? And then again, type of floor assembly. Most houses here are concrete slab. Beach houses are raised on pylons. And then just documenting insulation where I can. Now, the next thing, if you can pause right here, this is a ventilation page. So I am documenting how many exhaust fans I have, bath exhaust fans. And not only am I taking a picture of the exhaust fan itself, but I am finding where it terminates outside. And sometimes bath fans just terminate in attics. Well, I'm going to find that during this section of it. So keep playing it if you don't mind. Same thing with kitchen exhaust. I'm going to take pictures of not only the kitchen hood, but where does it terminate? Does the house have fresh air ventilation? Is it controlled? Is it filtered? Is there an interlock with the kitchen fan? Next thing we're going to do is a building pressure assessment. And so the first thing, you can pause right here, is a dominant duct leakage. We're going to run the system with all the doors open. I'm going to stick a manometer and reference outside. I want to see whether the house goes negative or positive with the HVAC system running. Now, this test right here, where the house builds pressure or it doesn't, is very limited unless you know what the blower door number is. But I'm still documenting it. Later on, we're going to get blower door because a tight house is going to depressurize easily. A loose house is not. But again, I'm just gathering all that data. Worst case depressurization, I'm turning all the exhaust systems on. I'm going to see what the house depressurizes to, because if it has a fireplace, we could have an early morning situation where all the bath fans are on, people are taking a shower, they're making breakfast, they're running laundry, and the house depressurizes to the point where a fuel burning appliances within that envelope can start backdrafting. So I'm going to see what that worst case depressurization is. And again, this is giving me data where if I need to build a solution later on to address that, I can keep playing it. And there's not a lot of combustion appliances in my area that are within the envelope. The next thing I do, if you can pause here, we're getting to the meat of the diagnostic. Then I'm going to run the HVAC systems and I'm going to close all the bedroom doors. Typically, I have central returns in in a lot of these houses. So when we close all the doors, the main body of the house is going to go negative and the bedrooms are going to go positive unless they have their own return, which normally they don't, or a jumper duct or a transfer grill. And so then I'm going to document what that pressure difference is, because if we're going negative in the main body of the house at night when all the doors close, people are sleeping, then we're going to be pulling in humidity, hot, humid air, pollutants, all that good stuff. Yes, this is an eye auditor checklist, and actually, I have both of these processes. You can actually download this process on the eye auditor app. There's a way that you can download my exact process. And whenever I update it, I always post the latest version of it there, where you can pick it up. And then we're just going to keep measuring all the bedroom pressure differences across the door, and this is going to tell me whether I need to get the True Flow grid. Sorry, not the True Flow grid. If I need to use the Roomulator from TEC to give them an option for a passive return, this is going to tell me if I need to do that. So we can go ahead and keep playing here. Again, I'm just sort of simulating a house right now. This isn't like real time, so some of these numbers may not jive. I'm just showing what some of this process is. I'm putting those pressures into ranges because I just want to know. This is a lot of qualitative, not quantitative stuff. We're going to make some notes here. And then again, I'm going to build recommendations based on that. Finally, combustion safety. If there is a combustion appliance, we're going to do some testing there. Then we get to the blower door test. Let's pause real quick. That first checkbox is to make sure that I am not getting ahead of myself while I'm trying to do a blower door test with windows open. I want to make sure that the chimney damper is closed, that all my mechanicals are off, that sort of thing. Then if we can keep going here, then the next thing I'm going to do, I'm not going to run the 50 pascals blower door test just yet. What I'm going to do, if you can pause it, is I'm going to turn on that blower door, and I have a Retrotech blower door, and I'm going to turn it on and just barely depressurize the house to around 20 to 25 pascals. And what that's going to do is start bringing in some of the heat and the moisture if I'm doing it on a hot day. But if I do the blower door first, then I'm going to go ahead and pull all that stuff in, and then it's going to be harder to see it on the thermal imaging. So I start with just barely depressurizing the house. Then I start walking around with a thermal camera and start documenting where all the heat plumes are and seeing where the leaks are and taking pictures. There's a ton of pictures for each room that gets taken as we do this. You can go ahead and hit play. And then finally, I'm going to do my CFM 50 test, and I'm going to document what that is, what my ACH 50 is, make some comments based on that, include my Retrotech report, and then I'm going to do a duct test. So let's pause here real quick, because according to Manual J, when you do a blower door test for a Manual J purpose, you're supposed to block off your ducts, because if you don't, you are including duct leakage with your envelope, and so you're kind of double dipping with duct leakage and envelope leakage. So when I do that blower door test, I have already taped up all my supplies and returns. Now I go ahead and do a duct leakage test. So those are two separate tests, and I'm quantifying what my duct leakage is. Go ahead and keep playing. And then I'm also looking at the nominal capacity of the units, either in BTUs or tons. I think Joe just popped on the screen. Joe, do you have a question?
I do.
Yep.
So based on what you're talking about closing off your ducts to do your blower door, and you
Mhm.
know you're going to do a duct leakage test. So the duct leakage test doesn't always confirm that my leakage is internal or external. So can you just kind of elaborate a little more on that, or a leakage to outside test, or do you do that, or you're really going into like deep building science diagnostics here, and
Yeah.
a lot of this gets a little fuzzy. So I thought I'd just make sure we're talking about the same thing at the same time as to where is your duct leakage and why are you separating those?
Most of my ducts is they're out of the envelope, 100% out of the envelope. And so if I have duct leakage, it's going to all be to the outside. Ducts are in a lot of them are in vented crawl spaces, vented attics in my area. So yes, I this would need to be modified if you have ducts within the conditioned space. And so again, every practitioner is going to have to do it a little bit differently. I am still learning the duct leakage or envelope leakage and duct leakage to the outdoors. I am not there yet. And so, yes, it is a little fuzzy. It's probably not perfect. And I would love to get with you online or offline to get that shored up. But what I'm trying to do is separate my duct leakage from my envelope leakage. That's the short answer, Joe.
One more
So,
follow up for you. So do
yeah.
you? So the duct leakage gives me total quantitative leakage from
Mhm.
wherever, right? Do you
Yeah.
also use a pressure pan to try and isolate where your leakage is?
I do own a pressure pan, and if I see some really bad numbers, then I'm going to do some further diagnostics there, and I probably need to build that into my process. It's more something that I'm probably just putting in the comments section. There isn't like a line item on the checklist for that, but I probably should have one.
So
So
let's just
thank you.
clarify for the listener. So when you do a blower door test that, and you have your ducts open, they're not closed off like
Mhm.
Tim had said here. Then you actually can use a little pan that you put over the registers, and any leakages outside that's coming in gives me some pressure that I can use on this pan to determine at a certain number. You're like, oh, that's where my dominant leakage is in that system, and you can isolate where your duct leakage is with a blower door and a pressure
Yeah,
pan. No duct tests are required. So the two together are very powerful, because I'm like, I have a lot of leakage, and it's actually these 3 runs are giving me
yeah,
my greatest leakage. So there you go.
yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
And I definitely want to get with you offline so that I can build that a little bit better into my process. It's still an ongoing process that I'm still kind of perfecting. So
You mentioned
uh,
weatherization, and ironically, most weatherization all across the country, they don't even own a duct tester. They do all of their leakage based upon a pressure pan with a blower door.
yeah.
So it's just a lot simpler. So there you go.
Yeah,
Glad we get
and
back to
it
that.
just kind of helps me to see, do I have a duct leakage problem? Is that something I need to pursue further, or do I just need to set it off to the side? One thing about this process, just zooming out, is that it is important to find where the problems are, but it's also important for me to be able to determine where they're not. So I don't spend their money in places that is not going to move the needle a lot. So I guess for me, the purpose of the duct test is, okay, do I need to pursue duct diagnostics more, or do I need to set that aside as my problem somewhere else? So probably a work in progress. I probably need to get with you and make this a little bit better.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Um,
So real quick, since we're on the ducts, real quick, so are you repairing these by hand or using Aero Seal? What's your process just while we're on the ducts
I
here?
have a weatherization company that I've teamed up with that does air sealing, insulation, and duct sealing. So they're going to probably do it by hand. All the ducts typically are accessible where I'm at. Some of them in beach houses are not accessible, and that's where like an aero seal will come in. But the aero seal contractors in my area do not want to do existing homes because they would have to cover everything up
Oh yeah,
and
for Aero
becomes
Seal,
cost
right? Air
prohibitive.
barrier. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Um,
Thanks.
yeah. So yeah, we'll keep playing the video here. So the next thing, I'm documenting what the equipment capacity is, and then what kind of duct system there is there, my duct insulation. I'm going to do a duct leakage test. I'm going to quantify that just so I have some information I can think about later on as I start building. Okay, well, what solution is going to give me the biggest bang for the buck? Let's pause there real quick. Here is where I do a conduit tech heat load calculation. So I'm going to scan the entire house with Conduit Tech, and I'm going to build a room-to-room heat load calculation. And if I have room-to-room comfort problems, I'm going to pay attention to that more. But now I'm going to pay attention to what is my block load and whether or not my block load matches my nominal capacity of my system. Is my system grossly oversized? And then earlier, I quantified what my delivered capacity is. So there are three things in the next report that we'll get to that the customer is going to see. What is the nominal capacity of the unit? Are we getting anywhere close to that nominal capacity out of it? And is that nominal capacity too low or too high based on a Conduit Tech manual J heat load calculation? So this is where I answer a couple questions. Is the nominal heating and cooling capacity closely matched to the heating load? And whether it is or not, then again, that helps me build recommendations down the road. I may not always tell somebody they need to immediately rip out that oversized HVAC system, but when I tell them, in a couple years when it's time to do this, then we need to go back with with the smaller system. Let's keep rolling here. I'll type up some comments, just some summary, and the customer gets this report. I don't make a lot of conclusions on this report. This is more just data acquisition and giving them something at the end of the day they can see, and then I come back later with a full report. And then finally, final observations. So what I'm doing is, in my own judgment, saying whether certain subsystems of the house are good, fair, or poor. And then at the end of the report, just like with the HVAC report, everything that I flagged it gets listed on there. Here's the report. This is the field report that the customer gets the same day. This is all the data that I just took. It gives a grading of the house based on the inputs that I gave and certain portions. So moisture assessment here, that house got a 90%, but the envelope only got a 66%. So where are we going to spend more time when we give solutions? Well, it's probably going to be towards the envelope. Building pressure was an 85. I don't really know why combustion safety was at 40% because there's no combustion appliances there. So it's not a perfect report, still working on it. But yeah, so this is sort of dividing up the house into subsystems. And then here is this summary of all the flagged items that I found, along with all the photo documentation. This is a real house that I did not too long ago. And then all the rest of the data will come here as we keep scrolling. Let's see here. Yeah, so moisture assessment. So all the tests that I just showed you guys, this is where everything gets summarized. So hopefully it'll speed up here in a minute. There we go. So everything green is good. I try to use color codes as much as possible. Green, yellow, and red. Sometimes blue if something is low. So very similar to what MeasureQuick does. Those visuals are very, very important. Here's my envelope assessment. So all the information that I took. And then, whether penetrations in the floor are sealed, I'll have a picture or two of not every penetration. Typically, if one penetration isn't sealed, none of them are sealed. And then obviously pictures of blower door. I'm documenting that I've done all this test. A lot of times the customer isn't home for all this testing, so they didn't see me do all that work. So I want to show them picture documentation. All my room pressures are here. The not only with reference to the main body of the house, but with reference to the outdoors. And all this is what the customer gets. This is also what I'll reference when I build a full report later on. Now, one thing that's not showing up in this report that I do, I also install a Haven IAQ indoor air quality induct monitor. And that's part of the process. It's built into my pricing in my general business. And I give that Haven 2 weeks to do its thing. They don't get a final report with conclusion for 2 weeks. That gives me time to ruminate the information, and then also, 2 weeks later, we have some more data that we can go off of. So we're getting here close to the end of the customer report, and then the next thing we're going to do is that final report. This is what the customer sees 2 weeks later. This is after I've gotten all the information, and now it's in the more easy to read format for the customer. So here is just some general boilerplate information about the process, helping them understand what we did. Then I've got just some photo documentation. I pick and choose the photos that explain the problem the best. So not all my photos are on the final report. That was on the field report. The final report has more of a summary. Now let's pause right here real quick. And I don't know whether you can back up a couple of seconds. I want to go back to those bar graphs, Ben. But yep, right there. So you see that HVAC system one heat load versus equipment versus actual. Here's we get to visualize what the load calculation called for, what the equipment is rated for, and what it's actually doing. And we divide that up: total, sensible, latent. And if I can run the heat, I will. Not a lot of times in my climate, I can't run the heat. But that is just a good visual to see. All those bar graphs should be pretty close to one another. If we have one of those colors that's really high or really, really low, we've got a sizing issue. Let's keep rolling here. I do, because I did a measure quick cooling efficiency. I showed them what the minimum code, what a high efficiency system is, what your system is rated at, and what's actually doing. So again, just using bar graphs and good visuals for the customers. And then here are some of my HVAC findings as we're some of the pictures, the stuff from Measure Quick, and I'm just summarizing. I'm making just observations here, pictures of leaky ductwork. I've got my duct leakage test from Retrotech there. It'd be nice if I could kind of integrate that into my process. Right now, I'm just doing screenshots. I got pictures of the blower door or blower wheel, just anything that I found on the HVAC side. Then I summarize those and I give a recommendation. The next thing that we do is envelope leakage. So again, just a graph that kind of shows where your house would be if it was a leaky house, if it was a tight house, and where your house is in reality. And again, where those lines are sort of based on what my judgment is. This is a Word document that I'm editing, by the way. So it's a little bit complicated. It's a little bit time consuming. I would love to be able to create an app that made this a lot easier, because Word is a complete pain in the rear to deal with. Again, we find our findings and our recommendations. I've got a picture of my Retrotech blower door test. I've also got thermal imaging pictures here. Again, I would love to be able to integrate my thermal imaging so I'm not taking a picture of a camera with another camera. I'll probably have to get up with Eric about that, because I know there's a better way. And just, again, going through the whole envelope assessment, here's where I'm drawing conclusions, making recommendations. That's a blank page, but there's room to grow. Room pressure imbalances. I'm using a graph. I'm using colors. I'm showing here's where you are. Here's what the normal range is. Here is, if you're out of a normal range, it's going to be out of the green zone, as we see here, I think on the next. Yeah, so this one, it's got a green zone for where we want pressures to stay within. And then when we're outside of those pressures, I'm going to have a note about that. And again, this particular house didn't have a return to the master suite. The master was going way positive when the door closed. The main body of the house was going negative. And I've got, again, documentation here of dominant duct leakage, worst case depressurization, just things that help me explain to the customer. They're not going to know what a lot of these readings are, but they're going to see that I made those readings. And then when I give my summary, I'm trying to explain it at a level they can understand. Insulation, again, what does the current code call for? Where is your house? Was there a problem with the insulation? This particular house had a giant missing spot in the attic that I found with a thermal camera. Had I not had a thermal camera, I would not have found that. They weren't calling me there because that room was hot. It's just something that I found. Water intrusion. This is a beach house. I didn't have really any issues there with water intrusion, so there wasn't a lot to report on. Looks like we got another blank page. and then indoor air quality, humidity, and ventilation. So here's where I bring in some information from Haven. I also take a screenshot of the Haven report. It'll keep scrolling down here in a little bit, but some of that information there on the left is just coming right off of the Haven website. They explain it very well. And then I summarize what I found in the home. Here's a screenshot over the Haven over the last 2 weeks. And I'm looking for anomalies. I'm looking for qualitative things, not so much quantitative, but qualitative. It's spiked here. You're generally running high humidity. You're generally running normal humidity, those sort of things. So I'm taking those screenshots and putting them in that document. And then finally, let's see, the summary findings. This is pretty much copied and paste from all the previous sections. This is where everything is copy and paste into one giant list of things that I found. And so as you can see, it's a very long list. It can be very intimidating to the homeowner, but the entire time I'm prepping them for this. I'm going to find a lot of things. Not all of them are directly resulting in the problems you're having, but this is a roadmap to how we get to a more comfortable house. Then my list of recommendations. Some of these things I do myself. Some of these things I refer out to another contractor. I talk to that contractor. I get some basic ballpark pricing, and I put them in an order that I think would give you the best bang for the buck. So what are the tools that I use? Well, I go to TrueTech Tools. One of the main things I use for MeasureQuick, I use FeelPiece, the Job Link kit, and I also use the Job Link manometers for static pressure. And let's see, the next thing we're going to do. Yeah. So my power quality meter, I use the Subco Redfish. It talks to MeasureQuick. It tells me what my kilowatts are, even what my power factor is. I also use stuff from Retrotech. This is their new Solo manometer. It's a non-Wi-Fi, non-Bluetooth manometer, but it has that same precision sensor in it. You want to get a duct tester? I happen to have one from Retrotech. It's a little bit older of a model. You want a blower door? I also have an older model, but you're going to get that stuff either from Retrotech or TEC. You're going to get them. There's my pressure pan. All the stuff is available at TrueTech Tools. The TrueFlow grid is absolutely essential. TEC makes that. Nobody else makes something like that for the HVAC industry. So I've got one of those. Again, really cool tools. Here's their DG8. That's a Wi-Fi Bluetooth manometer, precision manometer. You have to use it for the TrueFlow grid. I also have a little smoke pen. I'm looking to upgrade that one pretty soon, but this is just a simple one that I can visualize what direction air is leaking in or out at. I definitely want to get a better one. That's just the one that I got right now. Let's see. What's the next one that I'm doing here? As we look at the blinking cursor. Apparently I didn't edit that out. So here we go. Oh yeah, my thermal camera from Hike Micro. So I have the Pocket 2. It's about the size of a cell phone. It's great. It seems like pretty good bang for the buck. And that brings us to the end of the video. So one more. Atmo 2. This is my personal indoor air quality meter. And it's pretty affordable and it's pretty accurate from what I can tell. So I believe that gets us to the end of the video. But as you can see, I'm using a customized app to bring all this stuff in together. But yeah, I know I went through a lot of that stuff fast. I know people are going to have questions, comments, critiques. So I'm all ears.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was awesome. And I think to kick us off, one of the first questions I have for you is just, how did you develop this process? Obviously, it sounds like you're continuously evolving it. That's my first question before I throw some to Eric and Joe.
I am talking to other people that do it and getting the best of their processes. So I've talked to people like Jenry Garcia, Michael Hausch, Dustin Cole, Nate Adams, Sam Adams from Retrotech, Chris Hughes and Steve Rogers from TEC, Corbett Lunsford, even Allison Bales. You see his book behind me there, A House Needs to Breathe. I love being the dumbest person in the room, and I just want to absorb as much as I can from them, take what I can, and build my own process based on that.
I love that. And I will say we learn from all the same people, and that book is like our internal team. It's part of our onboarding process to Conduit, is you have to read that book.
Yep.
Well, Eric, Joe, Tim, I'm curious, the audience is composed of people in many different climate zones. Some of them have it easier than you do, Tim, in not so humid climates. But I'm curious how you think about, as you think about different teams you've seen across the board and how they've adopted different technologies and these technologies as well as tools into their processes. How do you see people tailoring these well so that they can be successful in their local markets?
And that's really the key. Markets and climates change. Some people have ductwork within the envelope. Some people don't. Some people have essential returns. Sometimes you have individual returns. You run into all kinds of different things. So tailoring it to what you expect to find. I'm not going to say that my process is the best. It's not the only one out there. It works for me in my market, and I'm constantly evolving it. But in order to know what to do, you've got to have an understanding of HVAC performance and home performance. So just becoming more educated, and so you know what things to look for, and you start making connections with your own market.
So I guess really, and Tim, I mean, I've got ironically, a very similar process that I developed doing some of the similar work that you're doing. Um, how long did it take you to put that together?
It's been an ongoing process over the last 2 years. I started it right after I sold my business. I was going through the transition process. I knew I was gonna be moving to a different market starting this business, and I just started talking to people. I would say definitely in the last year and a half, and every time I do a comfort consult, I take some notes and I go back and I tweak the process some more. So not one is ever the same. They keep evolving every time I do one of these, and I'm doing several a month now at this point.
So do you think that process, I mean, that's doing that kind of work, right? Where you're scaling that every time you go out. Do you think there's ever a point where you're going to say, hey, this is, you know, I'm done. I'm not going to change anything. We're just going to run with this.
Yeah.
Because I could see where that, you know, making adjustments constantly to a process like that would be hard to scale in a company.
Yeah.
Like it's easy for you to do with a single person.
Yeah. And that's why we need to develop templates that work for people, and it just needs to be good enough. Something like this is better than nothing at all. And yes, you can get the nerd in me wants to keep developing and making it better and better. The typical business owner, I couldn't do this when I had 8 employees. I can only do it now because I'm in the situation that I'm in. So that's an excellent point. We need these processes built for us, so that we can just implement them. And we never want to take measurements that we don't do anything with. And so if you notice here, none of the information that I'm getting is useless. It's streamlined to where I'm not taking a reading just to get the reading. I'm taking a reading to determine whether I need to create a recommendation or not. I would love to see your process too, for sure, Eric. I'd love to learn from you.
One question I have for you is just, and for all of you, is just when is the right time to change it? When do you, when you look at your process, when are you like, now I need to update this? Whether it be a new tool comes out or a new technology comes out, or whether it be like, oh man, this didn't go well on a customer job. How do you know that it's time to upgrade your process?
I think you take notes and you wait till you accumulate enough problems, and then you do it during slow season. Or if you don't have a life, you do it on the weekend. You do it when you're on vacation, because but yeah, you don't want to do it in the middle of busy season. You make those changes during slow season so you can implement them. You can hit the ground running during busy season.
Yeah, when I was doing this, I made changes almost daily. Like I would come home and be like, "Oh,
Yeah,
that
I
wasn't
did
in
it
my
first.
process." That's right. Yeah. So I'm now, as soon as I come back and I unload my car, then I'm like, okay, I need to add those things, and
Yeah,
I'll probably forget the next time. But these things are never finalized. In fact, every home is a slight adjustment, and everything is slightly different. If you think you got a can, then you're skipping stuff or you're not doing it right. So it's
right.
a constant learning curve. So
I
yeah.
agree.
I got a couple of questions that are the tools or what everybody. Oh wait, let's finish that. Kenneth Dean has a question. What's a cost like this going to run an average person? So blower door could be around $5,000, duct tester $3 to $5,000, IR camera maybe $1,000, and
Yeah,
yeah. So I'm sure you're looking at around 10,000 is just a basic
15 plus
setup.
probably.
15 plus, right?
So yeah, so take things in baby steps. Um, what I would suggest someone do is just use some financing, and get a few things at a time. I like to get 0% credit cards, and I just I'll rack up $15,000 and I'll pay it off in the 24-month period, and then that's a very manageable thing. But sometimes when I do that personally with furniture or things for the house, you can do that for a business too.
A lot of the stuff you talked about, you mentioned you have older equipment, and a blower door is a blower door that they really don't drift. It's your gauge that actually you want to make sure is dead on accurate. And
Yeah.
same with your duct testers. You can find used equipment and still perform high level diagnostics. So I encourage people to don't hesitate. And there's a lot of forums out there that are selling used equipment. So I encourage you to take that process. And if you want something better, then upgrade. But it's your manometer that you want to make sure that you send back. If you got to use manometer, you send that back and get it calibrated. That's number
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can also use older, if you find an older blower door or an older duct tester and you want to upgrade the manometer itself,
Mhm.
you can. The manometers are typically from the two major manufacturers, Retrotech or the Energy Conservatory. They're going to be backwards compatible, so they're going to work with the older equipment. So
My
that's
blower
another.
door is from the 2000s, and my manometer connects that same Cat 6 Ethernet cable to it.
Mm.
Works just fine.
Yeah.
So the tools are what really makes this stuff exciting for a lot of people. Like, oh yeah, the tools, the tools. That's what got me into the industry long, long time ago. So let's move into the why you were there, which is the occupant. I feel that a lot of people ignore the occupant, that they actually don't like that conversation. They don't like to go deep into that. So I just want to talk about your process about like, let's walk through the same thing you just did with all of these, checks and balances of what you did as to how are you working with the client as to what questions are you asking and how are you getting more information. And I can see how you present the report, but let's start with how do I get when I'm in the door, how do I know what it is that they have an issue? So why don't you talk about your process as though we were your client?
Yeah. So what I know internally is that not every client is for this process. I'm currently charging upwards of 1,200, and that's not enough money.
No.
I'm just trying to figure out like what I can get away with. There are some companies that want you to do this for free and then make your money on the back end. For me as a consultant, a lot of the stuff I'm referring out, so I have to make some money on the back end, but I also recognize that I don't do air sealing. So I'm not going to make that money unless I ask for like a finder's fee or something. So I have to think about all that. Not every client's going to understand this and be ready to think about it. Unfortunately, people are being educated by some of the most egregious offenders out there for not understanding what comfort really is. And so I just do my best to explain the process. I don't lead with the price because as soon as you say $1,200, like, well, I just want you to figure out why my ceiling is sweating in my bathroom. So you have to lay the groundwork and try to do some very simple education and talk about all the things that there could be going on with the house. And at the very end, so there's a lot of different things that could be the problem. I need to pinpoint which one exactly it is. If you're not measuring, you're guessing. I use all that terminology, and I tell them the most important thing I'm going to find is what the problem is, but the second most important is what it's not. So whatever money that you may not want to be spending on the testing, it's so that you don't spend that money in the wrong direction later on. I use a lot of doctor-patient analogies. Prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. Would you want a doctor that just prescribed medicine for your high blood pressure without even having a conversation about diet and exercise? What kind of doctor would that be? Well, HVAC contractor, they just want to treat the symptoms and not the root cause. What kind of contractor, what kind of advisor would that be? And some people get it and some people don't, and I am okay with them not doing it. I'm not going to lower my standards. Some people, I have a heat load calculation that my company did a couple years ago. That's cute. I'm still doing my own, and I'm not taking any money off of it. And so I have no problem walking away from a customer. That's my situation as a solo practitioner. I get it as a company. You can't do that because you're trying to get to work. So, but you got to test. You have to educate them on the need to testing. And the doctor-patient analogy works pretty well.
And I'm going to hit you up on something that's a little more specific and challenging. Okay, so I saw your blower door numbers, and that's a leaky house, but you described it as normal for that area. So I guess I wanted to ask you about how do you, talk to your clients about, well, it's okay here. It's like, well, everybody in my family has high blood pressure, as your example. Does that mean that that's okay? So and part of that is also your ventilation strategies. Is what do you have for balanced ventilation or other things like I see you're close to trying bringing them to a higher level, but somehow I think you kind of let them off that this was okay. So I just wanted to try to challenge you to,
Yeah.
6 air changes an hour is high actually.
Yeah, and well, code, if they actually ever enforce it, is 5. here in North Carolina.
So let me pause again. That's high for your.
Yeah, and I
You guys
get it.
cheated the code. Everybody's 3 around you, and you guys are 5
Yeah,
because
I get
nobody
it.
wants to do a blower door test. Okay, got it. All right.
So, but the other thing is, where are we going to be able to spend the money? Because if we try to air seal that house, we can do some basic things and maybe get it closer to 5. And that's what this particular customer did. They did some air sealing and got it closer to 5. But there comes a point of diminished returns when you're dealing with an existing house. And so I am not going to expect an existing house to get to 3 without spending this particular beach house to air seal this house. It's a lot. And so I have to put it in context with the houses that are around us. And there are a lot of houses that are 5 that don't have a humidity problem. So the humidity problem for this house wasn't due to the total air leakage. It was actually due to some very specific areas around supply registers and bath fans. But that's just how I think about it. And I'm still learning this. So again, critique taken. Thank you. And I may have to change that. I guess I also go for the rule of thumb that if your CFM 50 with a normal size house, I know it gets skewed with a big house, but if your CFM 50 is close to your square footage, air sealing is probably not going to get you a lot of bang for the buck unless it's localized air sealing that's fixing localized problems, which was the case here. Maybe I need to change that.
Well, I would think about actually doing your CFM per area, per surface area. That's really a universal measurement.
Yeah.
Getting rid of volume. So yeah, that's one highest level you could probably get to. Is like, okay, here's how you're really doing, based
Mhm.
upon these big homes get away with a lot because of their volume. So yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great
Yeah,
answer, though. Yeah, I challenge you. Well done. So it's all right. So the thing that you could be doing is like, well, for those who have, money to burn, then
yeah.
these are things you could do, and then you're adding ventilation
And I
strategy beyond that.
and I do want to stress that I did one of the highest points on there was still air sealing. I did not ignore air sealing on my recommendations. That was one of the first things that they did, and that was one of the single main solutions to there. So just because the graph says you're slightly above average in leakiness doesn't mean that I'm ignoring air sealing in my recommendation. Air sealing is always in my recommendation. Unless it's like on down, below 3 ACH 50 or something like that.
Yeah. So AL Anonymous chimed in air changes per hour, and that's actually a pretty general and poor comparison because 2
It is.
houses that are same square footage but have high ceilings can
Yeah.
actually do that. So yeah.
Yeah, and so and I recognize all of that. It's sometimes in the field you're trying to make qualitative decisions instead of quantitative, and I'm just trying to spend the people's money in the right direction. But anytime you can hit there, you can hit the main point, seal the lid, do all the stuff we know that we need to do. A lot of times that'll bring the air changes per hour and the CFM 50, all that stuff down to a more manageable level. And all you told them to do is like, we just need to get my air sealing company in here, seal the lid, hit the top plates, seal the penetrations. And that's going to be as much as we can reasonably do anyway. And we'll just see where the number falls at the end.
My last comment for you is I would encourage you to think about Air Advice. It's actually a device, I'm sure you're familiar with it, that actually is doing, they do a 30-minute snapshot, which is useless, but they
Yeah.
also allow you to leave it for a couple of days to get an idea. So combined with Haven,
Mhm.
you're actually in where people are breathing and you're getting the whole home assessment. So,
Yeah.
but
Thank
I
you.
think this is what you're doing is phenomenal. I hope a lot of people are going to be trying to figure out how do they encouraged to do this. But you're right. Maybe a 2 or 3 man shop could pull this off, but after that, it's just like you have a passion. You're hungry to do this and learn this, and that's really why you're successful. So well done.
Thank you.
One last question before we wrap up, for you, Eric and Joe, is what are different models that you've seen? Obviously, it's very hard to run this type of process. It takes a lot of experience, a lot of tools. But I'm curious what you've seen when you've worked with other companies, them adopt, and what you see most commonly adopted, and what you wish you saw more companies adopting as part of their processes.
Eric.
I'm starting to see more companies just generally thinking outside the HVAC box as I look around. And that to me is promising. This is a big ship and it's a lot of knowledge to turn on and build up. And especially unlearning some of the things that we've learned as HVAC technicians and starting to look more at that building shell. I would love to see the altruistic me would love to see everybody doing a process like Tim's, but I don't think we're quite there yet as an industry. I think it's going to be a slow moving process to get there, but we are seeing more of that type of thing in the industry. And I think that's very, very encouraging. Um, and I mean, I want to see more people doing this kind of stuff. I want to see more people at least offering to do it for homeowners and showing homeowners that these kind of things really can be done. These comfort problems really can be solved. And to Tim's point, we need to figure out how to talk to customers about comfort and tell them what comfort is, what kind of comfort is possible in their house, not just live with this. And I think Ben put another question down here too. So I don't know if we've got time to hit that, but Joe.
One of the things that became very apparent to me early is watching HVAC contractors that you get blamed for everything when people are uncomfortable, too much moisture, whatever it is, you're the blame, and they're not accepting that their builder did a poor job. So I've seen a few more HVAC contractors who are willing to be like, you know what, according to Measure Quick, this system is acting as best as it can under the conditions that we have. So let's flip this around. I'm going to have somebody come by next week and do a blower door test and show you that it's actually the envelope, it's actually the building that's causing these problems. And that's when everybody understands that it's the HVAC people cannot control everything, because you can only control what you actually install and you service. So that's only a fraction of why people are uncomfortable. So when people start realizing that, and you're able to explain that as an HVAC contractor and prove it, now you're able to defend yourself. Yeah.
I love it. Well, I know we are at the 59-minute mark. This discussion could go on forever, but what we will do is be mindful of everyone's time and just thank everyone who joined us. Thank you to Eric, Joe, Tim. This has been an incredible conversation and so interesting to learn about different processes and what people can be doing. If anyone in the audience has feedback on what they would like to see next, we don't have a formal webinar scheduled, but we would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to Conduit, True Tech Tools, Tim directly, or Measure Quick with what you would like to hear next. So thank you so much for the time.